Animosaurus World, and thank you so much for joining me again for another industry chat. Today, I'm very lucky to have with me the very talented Thomas Price. Thanks for joining me, Tom.
Hey Kim, how you going? Glad to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. Now, I know we're both in Queensland, which is awesome, but for everyone who doesn't know who you are, do you want to just say who you are and what you do?
Yep. All right. So I'm Tom Price. I'm an animator and a generalist, and sort of dabble in all sorts of all sorts of things related to CG. But I'm 33. I live up in Queensland, out the back of the Gold Coast, and at the moment I work remotely from home, which is really cool. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, the remotely from home, it's just like, yeah, a lot of people can probably relate to you right now going, oh, remote working.
Yeah.
But what's
Well,
what's what's really cool about, like our story together, we were only just chatting about this, was like we've actually got a history of something like 16 years, which is
it's crazy.
pretty amazing.
Yeah.
What really got, way back when you sort of started, what got you into wanting to be an animator?
It was a funny thing. I was thinking about this before our chat, and I was thinking back, and I was like, "Oh, what did inspire it?" And it was I've been homeschooled, so I was sort of at home and encouraged to do a lot of art. And we were still doing curriculum, but there was sort of a lot of time for creative stuff. But we grew up without a television, which is the funniest thing. So we lived out in the middle of rural Queensland. In the middle, you couldn't get further away from the animation industry, and I just used to draw a lot. I think I'd imagine things on my own to sort of create worlds and things to get lost in. And I think it was about 19 the late 1990s, and Toy Story had come out. Shrek was coming out around that time, and I just sort of I'd seen them in the local cinema, the town over, and just fell in love. Just thought, wow, this is amazing that people can create things that aren't real, that people connect with, and can create an emotional response. And I kind of fell in love with the idea of unlimited story, like unbridled storytelling. And I think that was what really initially drove it. I was only about 14, 13, 14 at the time, and just had really cool parents that were like, okay, if that's what you want to do, let's see if we can help you do it. And then moved moved out at 15. I was off
Wow.
to Alexandra Hills, TAFE, and then I
Yep.
studied a
Wow.
certificate four in screen, and that was sort of what kicked it off. Was yeah.
Wow, studying at 15. That is awesome.
Yeah, it
um,
was it was a bit terrifying. It was sort of the when you could still leave school in year 10. It was sort of around that time.
yep,
Yeah.
yep. Oh wow. Yeah, a big step. Like you said, moving from rural Queensland as well to come into the city to study by yourself. Did you have, was there many people around you that kind of helped you kind of adapt to the city at that point or?
It was totally weird. So I ended up sort of living with one of my dad's old diving buddies and his wife. So they were really great. They happened to live not too far from the TAFE there at Alexander Hills, and so yeah, it was sort of one of those things. I didn't know anyone. I just had those guys, and managed to organize a lift once I'd started with one of the guys that I was working with. He had a car and he used to drive past, and so I'd give him some fuel money every week. And yeah, honestly, it was just such a bizarre time. And I remember, especially at the start, feeling so young because everybody else had finished school. Some of them had finished uni. It was sort of this. Yeah, it was just totally a bizarre experience, but a really cool time.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so TAFE, after TAFE, you kind of ventured off. Where did you head after that?
So I still sort of didn't quite know what to do, and I think in Australia at the time as well, like the industry was kind of there wasn't a heck of a lot around in terms of studios. There was some of the bigger studios were around, but in Brisbane especially, there was not a heck of a lot going, especially for someone with no experience. So I sort of thought, oh, well, what else can I do? And I'd found that course at Quantum, which where we had met, and
Yep.
yeah, and that was basically what I did the year after that TAFE course, and that kind of helped cement that yes, this is what I want to do, and yeah, it was just more of a knowledge gaining experience. But yeah,
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, there's the study. So you did actually quite a lot of study for what animation was at the time, because
right.
most people kind of fall into animation just going, oh yeah, it just sort of happened, and then study over here and study over there. But you got into it so early, you actually got to put quite a lot of study into place before you ventured out into the real world. Then real world.
Yeah. Well, what was great about that was it gave me a really good foundation in Maya. And I think that was something I wouldn't have had on my own, because, I mean, especially at home, there weren't the resources that you have now. Like there was a few, I think there was CG Total and a few of the other sites out there that have tutorials, but a lot of it was kind of just trying to work out how this software works. And I think with those courses, it gave me, I think they were really early versions of Maya back then. I don't even think it was called, what was it called? Wavefront, or I don't know, it was something else. But
Yeah.
and that sort of helped set me up after I finished those courses to still keep working at home, trying to get better at it, and more of the technical aspects of the software.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So after the course, you didn't land. Most people fantasize about straight after the course they then get a job, and the industry is brilliant. How was your experience at the end of like getting to the end of study? How did you go?
It was the weirdest thing, because the time was coming up, and I sort of thought, well, what am I going to do? Like I didn't have a job lined up. I didn't even know really how to apply for a job. Um,
Well, how
Quantum
old
were
were
really
you at
cool.
that point? Yeah, because like
So
you
I would
said,
have
you were
been,
still young. So
16, 17, something like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And you're probably not even 17. So I would have been yeah, 16, 17, something like that. And then basically sort of, it was, the end of the year was coming up, and I was kind of going, oh man, like, what am I going to do? I guess I'm going to move back out home with my folks out, to Nanango, which is where I'm from, sort of out in the sticks.
yep.
And that was it. It was kind of like they had the industry night at Quantum, where industry people come around and look at your work and that sort of thing. And there was some really great things that some other people had done. But yeah, I guess I just didn't really know. Nothing landed for me. So I was like, oh yeah, that looks cool, but whatever. I'd done some Audi TT going through a tunnel, and it was sort of, I don't know. It was just kind of, I didn't really know what I was doing. But I did end up moving back out to Nanango after that, and it did kind of feel like the wheels fell off. Like I sort of felt like, oh man, what do I do now? Like I felt really removed from the industry, from anything. Like I just sort of thought, well, I'm literally physically removed, but also like, the connections and things that I didn't really have anybody to bounce things off. And what I sort of told myself is just stick at it, and then it's what you want to do. And I guess it's sort of hard to focus on doing anything else once you've decided that.
Yep.
And so I eventually got a job at a little printing place that printed the local newspaper in town. And every night I'd still be doing as many tutorials as I could find, whether it was, modeling a goldfish or trying to animate a little bird that I'd made or whatever it was, just trying to get better at it. And I think that in itself, like the persistence is what won out in the end. So it was kind of, this part of the story is where it gets a bit interesting, but I was kind of stuck out in the middle of nowhere, and I really had this dream that I really wanted to make movies and really wanted to be in animation, but it felt impossible.
Yep.
And then I got a job at the service station. I was doing night shift at the service station in this tiny little town in the middle of nowhere. It was kind of like, oh man, and then every spare second I'd sort of be trying to do animation. And then eventually I ended up at the abattoir in the town across. And that was a whole other world. Like I'm probably not naturally the most savage kind of man. So it was a bit kind of
very confronting, you could say, just saying,
oh
my God,
man,
people
alive.
do this.
Yeah. So I initially, my younger brother wanted to get a job, but he didn't have his license. And so I was like, oh, the abattoir's always hiring. I had my license. Let's both get a job there, and then I'll drive you. But then it turned out he didn't get the job. He was too young.
Oh.
And I did get the job. And so I had a good, well, I thought it was a good job at the service station, but I sort of left that because the abattoir was a little bit more money, and I sort of thought, oh, let's do that. And from the first day, it was like a horror show. Like you just sort of go in and there's just, they process something like 3,000 pigs a day. So it was like just this
Yep. Carcasses everywhere.
thing.
Yep.
Oh, and they'd give me the mop up jobs. So they'd sort of give me all the, pulling out bits and pieces out of the carcasses. And so it was just horrible job. But
you're the youngest. You got to start somewhere. This is where you start, right down the bottom.
Yeah, that's right. And there's not a heck of a lot of jobs out there. So it was sort of, you take what you can get. And I was still living at home with my folks. And there was a time there where I really did kind of look at the animation dream and sort of just thought, this is never going to happen. Like I literally can't get further from it. Like it's pretty much, if you were to paint the opposite picture of what animating is,
That was it.
And and it was, so I'd sort of gone from, thinking I was going somewhere with studying, and I thought they were pretty cool courses, and I thought I was doing okay, to suddenly just the bottom of the barrel, literally, like and it was a really hard thing to keep going at night. So you'd get up really early at about 4 a.m. and then you'd finish at about 2:30 or something, and then in the evenings I'd just be on the computer as often as I could be, trying to learn stuff with super slow internet. And
I was going to say, there was no NBN at that point. It would have still been dial-up.
Just
so
crazy. And eventually I got together a little bit of a demo reel. So it was absolutely terrible compared to what the students are putting out today. Even, like, it was just awful. But I'd sent that out to a bunch of studios around Australia and sort of thought, oh, well, hopefully that'll get me something, and didn't hear anything back. Unsurprisingly, didn't hear anything back. And I thought, well, I'm not going to give up on this. So one weekend I caught the bus down to Brisbane, which is a few hours away, and I physically had CDs, and I dressed up in a suit because I thought, oh, well, that's what you do when you apply for a job.
Yep.
And I caught buses and walked all the way around Brisbane to game studios, to anything that was slightly related to animation, and handed them CDs and just said, oh, look, I'm just looking for work. And literally, of course, they all look at me like I'm crazy. Like I've walked in, this young dude's walked in with CDs, handing out his demo, and didn't hear anything back. And fast forward to one morning, I was at the Meatworks, and I'm at this point I was in a cold room, so it's really freezing temperatures. You had to wear like a jacket in there, and I'm stacking boxes on a conveyor belt. That literally was my job, was just flicking a switch and stacking boxes. And I was having this real crisis inside, where I was just sort of thinking, this isn't what I want to do. How do I get out of this? And it was like a decision point where I was almost resigning myself to, this is who I am now, or I can be an animator. I can still get that dream and I can still do it. And I'd been working, you started really early before the sun's up, and I'd been working a few hours, and it was about 7 a.m. And I had this small voice inside just hit me right in the chest and just say, just go home right now, call up Photon at the time. And they were probably about, third or fourth biggest in Australia at the time. They were probably, certainly in Queensland, they were potentially the biggest. And I knew they were doing some stuff, and just call them up and just say, look, I'll do whatever it takes. Just you've studied, you've worked really hard. Don't let it die. Just go home and do it right now. And it was like I suddenly got all the courage in the world, and I just I went up to my supervisor, and I didn't even explain. I just sort of said, oh, look, I'm just going to go home. I don't know. I don't know if I'm coming back. Like, it was just this weird, I didn't quit, but it was like I was just stammering, kind of looking at them. They just they had such a high turnover rate that they were sort of looking at me going, oh, okay, might see you tomorrow. Maybe, it was just kind of this random thing. And then, but I couldn't shake this feeling inside that I just had to do this. And so I drove home in my little beige station wagon, and no one was home. My mum wasn't home, which normally she would have been. She would have been doing shopping or something anyway, but she would have told me to go back to work, potentially, right?
Yeah.
And so because no one was home, it was there was no one to talk sense into me. So I kind of went, oh, all right. I found the number. I looked it up, and and gave them a call. And I believe it was Amy was the receptionist at the time. And
Yep.
she picked up and she goes, I just said, oh, look, I'm just looking for work. I was just hoping to speak to someone. And she goes, oh, the guy that you need to talk to, he's in a meeting at the moment. Call back in an hour or so and you'll get through. And so I felt sick in my stomach. I just went, oh, she must get these calls all the time. She's just fielding me and just saying, see you later. So I said, okay, all right. I was super nervous, hung up again and waited an hour, called back, same thing. She goes, oh, yeah, the guy you need to talk to, he's in a meeting, still in that meeting, maybe try in another hour or so. And I just went, oh, no, they have these people here for a reason to stop people cold calling. And so the third time I did, I called back and she goes, well, actually, he's just come out of that meeting. And I thought, man, that was a long meeting. And,
do people actually have meetings that long, do they?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I'm shaking, like I'm literally shaking. I'm that nervous. And she said, he's just come out. I'll put you through to him. So next minute, I'm talking to this guy. His name's Marcus. And I go, I'm stammering, basically just sort of, this young, probably 17, nearly 18 around that time. And I've just gone, look, like I've studied, I've sent you guys my work, but, it potentially wasn't good enough, but I'll make the coffees, I'll sweep the floors. If there's anything I can do, let me know, I'm there. And he said, look, let me look up your work and I'll have a look at it with the lead modeler, because we've just come out of a meeting that said we needed to get a new junior modeler. And he said, I'll have a look at it and I'll give you a call back in a bit. So he hung up and my heart's through my mouth. Like I'm just going, oh my gosh, thinking that this super long shot, like it's crazy. But then about half an hour later, he calls me back and he says, oh yeah, I've had a look at your work with the modeling lead. Can you start tomorrow? And literally, I had tears in my eyes and I've hit the floor and just gone, can you give me 2 days? Because I knew that I wouldn't have, I had about $100 to my name. So I sort of was like, how am I going to do this in 2 days? I thought I can't drive there in that time. But, and 2 days later, I was living in a caravan park at Southport, and I had my first job as a junior modeler on Animalia at Photon. And to be honest, I think that bred this sort of gratefulness that I think I've tried to maintain through the entire my career.
Yep.
Where it's just going, we're so lucky to be doing this, and it's such an amazing industry. And sure, there's parts of it that are frustrating and hard and tiring and all the rest of it, but I always sit back and go, well, I could be working in that abattoir still, in another life. And it's sort of, it went on from there. So that, like, you just had to get your foot in the door, and that was it. And I think for me, it wasn't that I was more gifted than anybody else, because there were definitely a lot more people in my classes that were so much more talented. It was literally that I was just potentially more persistent than some, and just stuck with it and just kept going and kept going and kept going. And then Marcus, who I'll forever be grateful to, gave me that chance. He took a shot, and Steve, actually, the lead modeler, Steve Cyprios, was he was, he obviously said go ahead as well. So I'm super indebted to those guys, and yeah, it's a really, it's a unique story, I think, but
it's small threads.
That's how I get it. Sorry, it's such a long-winded thing, but yeah,
it's small threads that actually lead you through this way, into production. Because, like you said, and being grateful, like that time between getting out of yes, you're educated now, but it's that because I got a similar story where there's a period where you're just like, this is the real world out here, and it's pretty mean. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff which happens out there. So when you do actually persistently get your foot in the door, it's just like, you know what, I can do this sort of stuff. I am persistent about it, and you just go, yeah, re-energized.
Yeah, come on. That's it.
So what, from Photon on the Gold Coast, then, where did that, that would have been a fairly decent sort of contract. What sort of led you on after that?
Photon, actually, to their credit, they did this incredible thing where, as you would remember, they did this Disney Toon at the time, I think, after we sort of were about halfway through modeling, I think, at the stage, and that we were all our first jobs, and we all didn't know what we were doing, and I had a bunch of different guys, some junior riggers, junior modelers, no animators at that point, and Disney Toon had shut down, and there were all these veteran animators that were out of work suddenly, and they needed a job. And so Photon had done this thing where they'd hired a bunch of them. They were from 2D backgrounds who didn't really know how to use the 3D software we were using, but they basically did this mentorship where they had a veteran animator who could teach these guys that knew the technical aspects of Maya, and they could teach us how to animate. And so it was kind of, we all kind of got paired up, and I got paired up with this grumpy old guy, and I was like, oh man, this is this is not going to work. But at the end of it, he stripped down anything I thought I knew about animation, and he was so talented. And it took me a while, I think, just due to my age, like to get past myself and realize that the insecurities of them finding out I knew nothing about what I was doing, it wasn't an end game. And it was more when I realized that, you know what, this guy actually is incredible. He knows so much. It was one of the luckiest things I think to ever happen to me. It was really, really good. And over those couple of years, kind of built up this really great foundation for what animation is and how it works. And
there.
Yeah.
So that got you off the Gold Coast, or down on the Gold Coast. I'm guessing that you moved out of the caravan park at some point.
Yeah, eventually moved in with some of the guys from work, and it actually was just some of the best times. It was so fun.
Yeah. So where did you head to after that?
Well, it was sort of another one of those mini sort of dead zones for a bit after that. So when it finished, it was just heart wrenching because we had made all these amazing connections and had such great friends, and it was sort of like, oh, what now again, right? As it is a bit often in this industry, I think, especially when you're starting out. And yeah, I ended up moving back out to Nanango again and sort of just going, oh, what am I going to do? I was just sort of helping my parents have a bit of a hobby farm. So I was just doing chores and just doing all the yard work and all that sort of thing just to earn my keep. But I think there was part of me that had always been interested in kind of humanitarian stuff. And so I had a little bit of money that I'd saved. I didn't earn much at Photon, but I'd saved enough over that year that I think I was paying about $80 a week in rent. So it was
pretty good.
The share thing.
Yep.
And there was 5 of us, I think, in the house. I was in the office in the study. They'd converted that into a little bedroom. But yeah, so I had a couple of grand, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to go over to Africa and just see if I can go do something cool humanitarian wise. Like, I'd always been interested in it. And next minute, I'm with this crew. They're going over there to do this. It was like a work on an orphanage to kind of do some renovations and an extension on this orphanage in Uganda. And that kind of just really opened my eyes to the other side of the world and how it can really be so different. Even in Australia, we have it so good. But one night we're in this refugee camp. If I fast forward all that, we're in this refugee camp, and we were going to put on a DVD for the kids. And they put together this tarp, makeshift thing with some sticks and
hang it up.
We had a couple of hundred kids all around in the dust, and in a place called Gulu, which is North Uganda. The DVD that someone had chosen was Happy Feet, and so they put Happy Feet on, and all the kids, like half of them couldn't understand it, like it was in English, and that half of them couldn't read, and they're too young to really get it, but they're laughing their heads off, just loving this animation. It kind of really, really cemented in that moment. I remember having a light bulb moment. Oh, wow, this really can change people's lives, and it can really be something where it can reach you no matter where you are in life. And it was sort of one of those things that it was accessible to everyone. And here I am watching it play out on the other side of the world in the middle, probably on a bootleg version of Happy Feet. I have no idea, but then that inspired me to look at Animal Logic after that. So when I came home and sort of was going, well, you know what, I'm just going to keep working on my reel. Been here before, I'll do this again.
Yep.
This time I was armed with a bit more info and sort of knew a bit more about animation and modeling and that sort of thing, and had built my skills. And I put together, with the help of some friends, I'd put together a really okay reel for the time. Like, it wasn't anything brilliant, but it was enough to be able to get me a mid-level modeler job at Animal Logic, and that happened to be on Legend of the Guardians. So that sort of was, at that point, I was really kind of more cemented in animation. I really wanted to do that, but I still had the generalist skill set of being able to model things. So I was kind of like, well, all right, if we're doing that, I'm not going to be
not going to cry about it. Yeah.
No, that's right. So I was absolutely stoked again, and just so grateful for that opportunity. Moved down to Sydney, lived in a little, when modeling was coming to an end, animation was kicking off. And it was sort of one of those things where I didn't have enough experience animation wise to really impress the guys in animation. So I'd stayed back late for about a month doing an animation test on one of the characters. So I was in my modeling department, which is a different building, but grabbed one of the rigs and did this cool little test and showed it to the animation lead and the animation supervisor. And he goes, yeah, you're good enough. We'll give you a job in animation on the feature. So
nice.
And that honestly, but it was sort of one of those proactive things. I think like I couldn't just wait around and sort of hope somebody would throw something. I had to be consistently proactive about just going, all right, I'm gonna prove that I can do this. I know I can do this.
Chase after it.
And then I was lucky enough to have some great leadership on that movie, and it honestly just set me up. Like, I got a lot of really great shots and was able to sort of artistically express myself. And it was just, honestly, another really great time. And then that sort of set me up for the London thing after that. So,
so you're getting out of Australia now. It's like, I'm going away.
I spent about 3 years at Animal Logic, and then off to London, and then from London, oh gosh, it was just a whirlwind. So, brief time over there, but a couple of different studios, and then back to Australia. I was working remotely for Fuel Visual Effects for a little while, and then went to New Zealand and worked for a little company over there, and just crazy, just such a bizarre experience. But then eventually ended up at RSP in Adelaide, which was just awesome. Like such a godsend, really. Like it was like a breath of fresh air. Yeah, and then I spent about a bit over 3 years, I think, there. And by this point, we'd had 2 kids, and we sort of were in Adelaide. It was on the other side of the country to where we're from. And I sort of made the tough call. I was looking around at everybody that I was working with who had families and everything, and they lived in Adelaide. And I sort of went, well, 10 years is going to go by like that, and we're not going to know, they're not going to know their grandparents and their cousins and that sort of thing. So even though it was a really great position to be in, it was sort of one of those things where we made the tough decision to come on up to Queensland. And even though there was not that much animation wise to do, about a year before the move, I'd sort of really put a lot of steam into doing the Smile Factory, which is the wedding videography. And so it took about a year of every weekend I was doing a wedding every single week, and then editing through the week with young kids, and that was a tough one while working at RSP. And then eventually had enough bookings to make the step into doing that up here. And that sort of became the focus for a while, until randomly got some remote work up in Queensland. And it was sort of and I briefly worked on Thor Ragnarok with Gareth Cohen. I saw that you'd interviewed him as well a while back. And a few of those guys, and that he's such a nice guy. So good to meet him. But just sort of ended up doing a bit of previs there and that sort of thing. And I'd done a little bit of previs before, just here and there, but that was probably the biggest thing that I'd done previs wise. And sort of Yeah, and then the rest is kind of history. So bouncing between, in the middle of contracts, I'd be doing the videography work, and then do animation for a while, and videography and animation, and then eventually, about a bit over a year and a half ago, I got a message from one of my mates in the States, and said, he goes, "Oh, look, we're looking for people. I work for this little remote studio over here. Would you be keen?" And so I went, "Oh yeah, awesome." And I think it was a bit of a lull for the wedding industry at the time as well, and so next thing you know, I'm working for this amazing little studio in the States called Little Zoo, and I'm still with them now, and they're just brilliant. So it's sort of every now and then there might be like a few weeks break, or a couple of months break in the bigger breaks, but that's just been a godsend. It's been absolutely amazing, and especially through this COVID season with the wedding industry shutting down essentially, and that kind of has put a stop on the wedding business for now. But I had other people we built it up to a point where we had other people filming and editing and stuff, so I could still animate. But now I'm very happily animating remotely from home for them. So so that's a long story, but that probably brings us up to now.
Because it's really interesting. You were pretty much getting set up for remote work before anything sort of happened. You've been working remotely for ages, so you've probably got all your structures in place for how you work remotely, how you shut out the world, or what sort of things you do. Do you have any tips for anyone who's really just starting to get into remote work for that?
It's a tough one. I think it's a bit of a tough one with hours. So sometimes in the States, like my meetings at the moment are 11 p.m. at night, so it's like after a few weeks of that you get pretty tired. But I think trying to manage your rest is a big thing, if the hours are different. But I think I honestly I'm so grateful for it that I probably work harder than I have to, and I think that's a plus. So it's sort of I try not to take it for granted. I think that's one thing. Like when I get those opportunities, I really I'm working big days every day, really trying to make it a good thing so that they hire me again, But the tips, I guess it's it's one of those things, isn't it? It's just do a really good job and try and be a nice person. I think that's about it.
And like you say, you actually found this by you were approached for the remote work by just people who have worked with you before. So
that's right. Yeah. So I didn't actually seek it out, and it was there's been a few that I have sought out in the past where I've sort of sent I've heard that they do remote, and I've sent an application through, and they've got back in touch that way. But I'd say the majority of it is just word of mouth and friends sort of recommending you. And I think that's as an industry, I think that's, as you'd probably agree, like it's such a word of mouth industry. It's like, oh, who do you know that's good and nice to work with? And then you'll be like, oh yeah, this guy or that girl, or,
Yeah, it is very much so. Like you said, it's small industry now. It's just like, oh yeah, you look back through my little catalogue of videos, and already you mentioned Marcus, you've mentioned Gareth, and worked with both of them, and they've both done this as well. So it is very much a small industry. People. So yeah, all right,
absolutely.
All right, Tom, thank you so much for sharing some of your, I guess it's your wide breadth of knowledge, because, it's a long history you've shared. So thank you so much for jumping on and sharing that with everybody. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me, Kim. Great to be here.
Excellent. And until the next time, thank you for joining me. This is Kim. See you later.